think you could stick about any player on that Chicago roster and they probably would have had similar results.
FaZe is running out of steam.
They will be number 1 in the standings at the end of the season.
Malik, man.
Here's the thing though, Ben.
What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Contesting the Point. I go by the name of Malik Forté, and let me tell you, last weekend was pure insanity here in the CDL, and I got two of the most clairvoyant casters to break down the action with me, MerK and Benson. Both of you guys predicted the results of the last 2 weeks. How you feeling about today, though?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good. First of all, I want to say I love working with Joey D. Love it. I've been a host of show just like this where Joe has come out and destroyed and I've been left in awe. And I know Joe can say the same thing about me. So today is going to be a good show. I'm excited. Me versus Joey D. Battle of the actual intelligent casters at the CDL. Oh, it's going to be a good time.
Well, you beat Clint last week?
Yeah, it was easy. Wasn't even worried.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
Naturally. You beat
He just yells the whole time. He just yells.
Did you beat Chance the week before or no?
Well, results-wise, I think I did, but Malik gave him the W. But it's fine. Okay, I had a couple of tough arguments. It's all good. It was
tough. And look, we can't get them all right here on Contesting the Point, but let's aim for this week for sure. Let's aim for this week. But before we get into things, let me go ahead and break down the rules for those who might not be familiar. This is how it goes. I'm going to present a headline for the CDL. I'm then going to give a hot take on the story. One will defend the hot take while the other attacks it. I'll award points for convincing arguments, and after 3 stories, whoever has the most points wins 60 seconds to pop off in our ASTRO Listen Up moment. That sound Gucci, fellas?
Love it.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's get into it with our first story. Obviously, the talk of the streets coming out of the Paris home series is the Florida Mutineers doing it big. Now, they're the first team to win 3 home series events, the first team to win back-to-back events, and now they've officially secured the number 2 spot in the standings. To be blunt, Florida's looking like the best team in the league. They even took down FaZe in the finals, gave them their first 3-0 loss of the season, and don't get me started on that final map. FaZe was totally outclassed on Hackney Yard domination and ended up being a record-setting win for Florida. They ended up taking it 232-70. So, I mean, case in point, the Mutineers, they look near unstoppable. So with that being said, my hot take is that they will be number 1 in the standings at the end of the season. MerK, don't think you kind of agree with me on that. So tell me why they won't be the number 1 team.
Yeah, I'm going to attack this. I'm going to side with FaZe. I believe they will finish number 1. In simple, you have 3 events left, and the next one for Atlanta FaZe is looking good. In their group, they play the Gorillas, Toronto, or Paris. All teams that they should beat. They should 100% get out of this group. And even if, say, they get upset by the Gorillas, I give them the win over Toronto and Paris. So that's 20 points right there. You then look at maybe their semifinals matchup. Well, they have to beat a Chicago, New York, Minnesota, London. I don't think that there is a team at this next event that is better than them. Minimum, you give them 30 points. That really brings their lead up to 60 points overall. And then it just all comes down to that final event that is going to be at Toronto, where you do have some of the better teams all in one group. And it's going to be tough for a team like Florida. For a team like Atlanta, I just think it's going to be difficult for them to catch up. In plain and simple, Atlanta FaZe, they have the best average placement throughout this year at a 1.92. We talk about them struggling, but no matter what we talk about them struggling is they have made every single final that they have played at. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see it from Florida, but you have to just talk about how consistent Atlanta FaZe has been. They've given themselves that cushion. It's going to be tough for them to make up that 30 points.
All right. So you don't quite see the paradigm shifting in favor of the Mutineers quite yet, but Benson, tell me, how are you feeling?
You know, this is actually a really hard one to argue. I think Joe brings up some fantastic points. The reality of the situation is there's 3 events left. The deficit between first and second is 30 points. For me, you're looking at FaZe choking. Now, historically, has FaZe choked? No. To Joe's point, they haven't at all. Look at their Game 5 record, 8-1. Yeah, looks fantastic. But in my opinion, that will come to an end. And I think now, knowing that there's more pressure on their shoulders than there maybe has been before, and also the fact, I think in the back of their mind, they know they're guaranteed first or second. There's no way in hell FaZe slip down to third. I think we can all agree there, right? So you've already secured that top seed. So I think a little bit of maybe slacking might come through, and it could allow Florida to propel forward a little bit. And I think it's going to be hard, Malik. I'm not going to lie. I think it's going to be very, very tough. But I do think FaZe is running out of steam. I think that final last week shows you that they're so beatable right now. Priest are specifically underperforming. I think they've set it up where potentially Florida could take them over.
Here's the thing, though, Ben. This was the first time we had back-to-back home series events, right?
Sure.
We knew that Florida was going to carry their momentum. We know how strong that momentum is, and even at the Minnesota event, we talked about how FaZe just didn't look like themselves. They weren't going to get that much better within 4 days. And to your point, them talking about slacking, just not going to happen. They want to be the number one team in the world. No, because I think you could say that if they were winning, and maybe they showed some vulnerability, but the fact is they are not winning, right? That is typically in Call of Duty history when we do see some slacking off.
That's fair.
Maybe if there's going to be anyone you're a little bit worried about, it is Florida, because they're going to have some time off. Teams are going to be able to catch them up, maybe watch their VODs, maybe switch up their vetoes. Obviously, Florida, the number one team in the world right now, but to say that they will slack off now just isn't it. Atlanta FaZe, they're pissed off that they're not the number one team in the world, and they're going to try and face that.
Guys, I want to jump in here with a quick question. All right, so our next event coming up, we have New York. The Subliners will be playing their home series event, so I imagine their play will be up a little bit. They're in the same bracket as Atlanta, a team they've taken to Game 5 the last several times they've played them. What do you guys think is the chances of them beating the Atlanta FaZe and possibly, setting them back from that number one spot in that home series event? Is that a possibility?
I think it's possible. I genuinely think there's a chance that FaZe does not win the next home series. I really, really believe that because, again, they're showing not just signs of weakness, which is kind of what I said before, but massive signs of weakness. Like, you look at that Dom against Florida. I mean, yes, that's against Florida. Yes, that's against one of the best teams in the world. But all these Game 5s, like Joe, and this is perfect because you were a part of the team, the old Envy squad. I believe it was yourself, Parasite, Nameless, and I honestly completely forget the fourth. Was it Steady? It was Steady. You went, I think it was 11 Game 5 wins in a row. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. But the reality of the situation is the magic has to end at some point. You cannot consistently rely on that Game 5 run. It has to come to an end. It will come to an end. And that's the scary thing for me with FaZe.
Yeah. You're right about that. I'm gonna throw in one more quick question, and that goes around the following week at the London home series, where we'll see Florida, but not FaZe, but a couple of the same teams. You got like the Dallas Empire and the New York Subliners who will be playing in that. What is the probability of either one of those teams beating Florida?
I think if you look at the New York home series first, what did Atlanta FaZe's biggest competition? London didn't look great. New York, they looked better, but still they have struggles. You're looking at Chicago, and right now I 100% give the advantage to Atlanta because they have the best search and destroy that we've seen throughout the year at 71% win ratio, right? So Atlanta has that. You look at that London home series, Florida are the favorites. They shouldn't be beat by anyone besides the Dallas Empire, and that's just we're gonna talk about, can Dallas catch up to them? Because, well, recently, Dallas has been getting smoked by Florida. So when we talk about these two teams, Atlanta and Florida, they should both at least get to a final and earn themselves 30 points.
Yeah. Okay. Benson, anything else you want to add? 'Cause I think I'm coming to my conclusion here.
I think it's borderline impossible, but there's something, I have an inkling. Like, I don't know what it is. My COD sensors are tingling that potentially FaZe are going to throw it away.
Okay. All right. Well, this was a good discussion. You guys took me in both directions, and my heart says that I'm kind of on the Florida bandwagon personally. But
Let's go.
I feel if you look at the numbers and the way that MerK broke down the numbers as far as CDL points goes, I think that things are looking a little bit more in favor of the Atlanta FaZe right now. They have a easier road to winning some CDL points, to scoring some points, excluding that last event in Toronto where they possibly will see Florida. So with that being said, this first round goes to MerK. 6-5 is our score at the end of round one. Keeping up with Florida's insane performance this weekend, let's talk a little bit about the individual performances that we saw. Obviously, Awakening continues to impress with a 1.24 kill-death ratio that he dropped at the event, and Pharaoh was hot on his heels with a 1.19. But the biggest overall, however, was Sky's with a 1.42. Insane. But he also is their AR player, so his stats are going to be slightly inflated. Keep that in mind. So, obviously, one of these three players was the MVP. But my hot take is that Awakening was the clear MVP of the Paris home series event. Benson, you sound like you don't quite agree with me, man. Who else could it have been?
Malik, man, you have a lot of hot takes. It's very rare I disagree as much as I do with this. Clear MVP? No. Don't get me wrong. Awakening has been phenomenal. The kid is a beast, let's be honest. We've seen the effect he's had on the team since coming in. It's truly impressive stuff. But to say clear does his teammates a massive disservice. I think you have to look at Skies. Now, the week before, had incredible stats. He led the leaderboards very much as he did last week. A 1.42. Skies has been in incredible form now. Not just one event, but two events. He's showing that form consistently. Not only is he showing that form consistently, he's showing that form consistently against the best teams in the league. He's been absolutely incredible. You look at his hardpoint KD, it's the number one in the league from the entire last event. As you said, a 1.42. His Dom, it gets better. Can you believe that? A 1.69, again, number one. But more importantly than the numbers, more importantly than the stats, the thing that has taken my attention when casting Florida, and I assume Joe can probably agree with this, is the important kills that Skies is picking up. He's rotating early. He's winning 1-on-2s. He's securing Florida, 10, 20 seconds of hill time. That's numbers which we don't actually include statistically. Don't get me wrong again. Awakening is doing a great job of popping two pieces inside the hill. But Skies is setting up that Florida Mutineer team for success in hardpoint, and he's clearly doing something right in domination to have the numbers he has.
Yeah. No, you know what? That's very interesting that you pointed out those crucial kills, because I think that's something that is like a stat column that we don't see, right? Yeah. It's one of those things that people don't pay attention to. That's a really good point that you made there. MerK, what do you have to say on the flip side of all that?
Skies has been great all year, correct? I think we all believe he's been one of the best man ARs. I could compare it probably to a guy named like Octane, right? Who's also been a really good AR, but his team has struggled. And Florida, they won an event, but they showed signs of weakness and they had to make a change. And everything has changed once they've added this kid Awakening. And you just have to talk about it. Just every single time. They had a lot of role issues. Awakening fixed that. Not only is he dropping numbers, leading his team in damage, having the highest average number of kills, getting 10 first bloods. I could continue to go on, but he's also doing it in a flex position. He's running a sub. He's running an AR. And what's so important is that they have been pushed to a game 5 number of times. If you want to argue Pharaoh, I think you could, right? Because he's just been so good running a full-time sub. But the fact is he's not in your top 10 when it comes to search and destroy. Skies, great with that man AR, has been consistent, been a workhorse for them. When it comes down to a game 5, not in your top 10 in search and destroy KD. Talk about maybe a similar team in FaZe, like they are going to get pushed. The Florida Mutineers are going to get pushed, and they need to clutch up in game 5s. They just had to do it a week before at the Minnesota event. They had to beat Chicago in a game 5. They had to beat Dallas in a game 5, and they had to here in the semifinals. They had to beat New York in a game 5, or they don't even get to show that they're as good as they have been against Atlanta FaZe when they 3-0 them. So when you talk about search and destroy to me wins championships. He led the way for them. Joe. He had a 1.35 in search, number 5 overall. The other two just not in the top 10. So I'm going with Awakening. Just so good in every single game mode.
I want to find the VOD of Joe saying exactly the opposite from like a year or two ago. Saying that's sure doesn't win championships.
No. Maven. That's all been Maven. Yeah, okay. That's all been Maven.
Sure it has.
All been Maven.
I will say, as much as I like Joe's points, I don't think they're valid. I don't think Florida have anything to worry about with the likes of New York. I really don't. And you want to talk about going game 5 against FaZe? FaZe can't even get close to a game 5 against Florida. I don't think Florida have to worry at all about that because of the work that's being done in the respawns. I mean, Florida look just so much better than FaZe doing respawns. Honestly, it's making FaZe look lost. It is genuinely as if there's 5 players who don't know where they're going on the map, and I think Skies, again, is a crucial part of that. The early rotations, winning those clutch gunfights, securing his team 20, 30 points, and then the Dom. I mean, Jesus, Joe, you want to talk about one of the fastest domination games we've seen all year? Look at the final. And then that was mostly Skies putting in a massive shift. Although I do agree with the sentiment about search and destroy, and I think there you do look at Awakening as a key component to their success. I don't think Florida really care. I don't think they have to worry about going game 5s against some of the top teams. Yes, it's a little concerning that they're going against the other teams.
That's not true. That's just not true, though. They've already done it. They've had to go to a game 5 with
And
Dallas. They've already had to. Great, but you cannot always. What? Okay, so you're going to go to a game 5?
If you're beating FaZe 3-0 in the fashion they are right now, they're not worried about game 5s. They're just not worried about game 5s.
Before that, they went to a game 5 against New York. They already went there. They're going to go there, and you need players to perform in search.
Against the lesser competition. I agree. I do agree. You need players to perform in search, but against the lesser competition, I don't think it matters. I think that's where you can have Pharaoh and Skies perform, averagely well in search and still win search and destroy. Against the top teams in the league, though, specifically the top teams, they're seemingly cruising through, man. I mean, you look at their stats, Florida versus Chicago on the year. It's the Chicago boogeyman, apparently. Plus, I do want to point out, I do want to point out as well that your point about how, since adding Awakening, the role changes have come through and it's made it a lot more simple. Let's not forget, they were in grand finals before Awakening came in. They won an event before Awakening came in as well. So for me, he hasn't necessarily. Yes, it's been an inconsistent season. I think that's the point. He's fixed consistency. He hasn't necessarily fixed, they weren't very good, now they're great. That isn't really the effect he's done. They've shown signs of greatness all season. And again, key component to showing signs of success all season has been Skies. He's been phenomenal all year, and we don't even really talk about him. And that, to me, is absolutely insane. I
they
think
weren't
he
winning.
deserves all the credit. Right, but that doesn't... I guess define your MVP, right? What does MVP mean? If you're just looking at the most valuable player in the league, does he have to be winning? That, to me, is the question that we always ask.
No, that's fair. I always believe most valuable player is just who's the most valuable to their team.
Dude, I think Skies has been incredible, man. If you do a hardpoint breakdown of Florida, dude, some of the stuff he's doing on the map, there's no other AR in the game doing. It's as simple as that.
You're making good. You guys are both making good points. I do have one question though before we get out of this topic, and that is who is in charge of the comps? Who's the shot caller for the team mostly?
Joe would probably know the answer to that better than me.
I think we'd probably say a good mix of Havoc. We're still learning about Awakening. He could do it, but from what we knew before Florida, it was Havoc and Mox. So they've had to make some adjustments. I imagine in Search and Destroy, Pharaoh probably makes some play calls with how good of a search player that he can be.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I'm just interested to know who's kind of calling the shots and kind of keeping the team focused and composed, because I feel like vocal leaders in those situations, those clutch situations, are very important. And Ben kind of touched on those crucial moments a little bit when he was speaking about Skies, and I think that's something that people don't acknowledge enough. Those pivotal plays that need to be made during rotations, be it in domination or hard point. If just getting those couple kills and inconveniencing another team with a respawn is enough to basically sway my opinion. But, which means, go ahead.
Hold on. The last point I'm going to say is that Search and Destroy has been their weakest game mode even before Awakening. And now with Awakening, they're beating some of the top teams when they do go to the game 5, and I think that's the difference with him.
Okay. All right. That is true. Why do you have to make this harder for me, MerK? I should have just kept going.
But you said you were still worried about him anyway. So
still worried about what?
You said you're still worried about Florida in their game 5s, and you're still worried about Florida in their search and destroy.
Well, everybody should be worried about Florida in their game 5s.
So let me ask you this: Are you worried about Florida's respawn right now?
I mean, I think they're ahead right now, but teams will catch up. Atlanta and Dallas have shown that they were clearly ahead. I think that Search and Destroy is easily the most consistent game mode that we have this year. With the spawn system in both hardpoint and domination, there are going to be things that go wrong, and it'll happen sooner or later.
So let me just finally, I'll end with this. The hot take was Awakening is the clear MVP. I think between the both of us, we've had enough of discussion to say that is not the case. You cannot say he is the clear MVP of the Florida team or of the league or even of the Paris home series. I think there's enough of an argument where you can say, Skies, you could even, if you really wanted to, really wanted to, and I believe, Joe, you could argue this pretty well, Pharaoh is the MVP of this Florida team. Just because of that, I feel like the hot take answer is no, Awakening is not the clear MVP.
Well, I mean, when you talk about, again, you look at the semifinals, going to a game 5, the search is important, but also the final. The fact that you go up 2-0, you win the Search and Destroy against Atlanta FaZe is just so important to them. That's how Atlanta FaZe was getting back into those series. That's where they've been at their best all year long. So you need strong search performances, and you got it out of Awakening.
They were starting a lot of those sweeps in game 3, Joe. A lot of those reverse sweeps, they were going 2-0 down. Let's not forget that. Game 2 wasn't as crucial to FaZe as You may have just let on. They were losing.
I think it is against Florida. Or
specifically against Florida? Okay, that's fair.
Yep.
Yeah. Guys, this is tough. I'm not going to lie. Awakening has been my favorite player to watch these last couple of weekends. So
I don't blame you.
I'm not changing my position. I still think that he was the MVP of the event. I did say clear, though. Benson, you're right. I did say clear. And the point that you made about the pivotal plays that Skies makes, that is embedded in my brain right now. So with that, I'm going to give you this round 7-6. Ben is the winner of round 2, which brings our total score basically to a tie at 12 points.
Spicy.
Man, this has been a tough episode with two of the most clairvoyant casters in the league going back and forth. So this last round is for all the marbles. Let's get into it. Our last topic, I want to touch on something that Rich said at the end of the broadcast on Sunday. He said, this is a new era of Call of Duty, meaning that we're seeing a whole new generation of stars rising in Modern Warfare, which is something that I agree with. Looking at the ages of all the star players, they're all around about 19 or 20 years of age, and a lot of them seem to be coming out of challengers. So with that in mind, my hot take is that teams should focus on picking up players from challengers rather than trading for existing pros. Ooh, that's a spicy one. Benson, something tells me you're not quite on board with that. Tell me why.
So let's be honest. Okay, Malik, we have 3 events left in the season? Roster lock, I believe, is in 2 weeks from when we're recording. It is July 6th, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Monday, 2 weeks from today. You know what? I'm even going to check my calendar. Yep, July 6th is going to be the exact date. Roster's lock. Don't want to tell any lies or misinformation. Now, let's be honest here. If you're going to make a change weeks before the biggest event of the year, weeks before the biggest prize pool in Call of Duty history, and you're going to tell me you're going to take a risk on a player who's been playing challengers all year and who hasn't been playing against pros, who isn't a proven professional player at the biggest event of the year, no chance in hell. And I know Joe is a former competitor. There's no way, Joe. There's no way. There's nothing you can tell me where you would say that if you were playing now, you would make that risk. There's no way you would do that. You have to pick up players with experience. Players who you know will be cool, calm, and collected in those big moments when you're playing for the most amount of money that we've ever seen in Call of Duty esports. To me, this is a simple answer. Now, when should they have picked up challenger players? At the start of the year, first few weeks in when you realize things weren't going on? Sure, that's the perfect time. I think Mac Meltz, when he was picked up to New York, that was like the threshold for me of when can you make a risky change? When can you bring in a player who you don't really know too much? Yes, he's been performing in challengers, but can he do it in the league? That was the time period where it was like, all right, if you're going to make a change, go for it, right? And then if you want to argue, even further, you look at some of the players who have made an impact this year. Well, Zero, first of all, to London, he's not a challenger player, and look at the effect he had. And you can say Prestini to Chicago, instant success. Yes, they have their massive downfall now. Sure, I will admit that, but still, the effect he had, and I still think that Chicago team is in a pretty good spot to cause a ruckus, come champs, and you can say Saints back on LAG. Look at the effect LAG has had. Constant improvement. You need veteran players now. You do not need amateurs.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. This is something bent about a couple of those examples that you made, like Chicago, that I'm not 100% sold on, but
I'm not 100% sold on Chicago right now. I will give you that, Malik.
Yeah.
But Zero, Saints, I mean, you can see the improvement. With limited amount of pro play, you need a championship caliber proven player. You do not want to risk on a challenger player.
Right, you need someone who's tried and tested. I get it. What do you have to say about that, MerK?
So when you talk about teams that are going to make changes, you're going to talk about teams that need change. They're the teams that are going to try to put themselves in a position to not even try to win. They're just going to try and do better at this point. Would they love to try and win? Absolutely. But listen, we're realistic people. We know how difficult it is for them, to, especially if they're starting in losers round 1 at champs. So for me, it comes about taking risks, and that is why I say you go for the challenger players, because what else do you have to lose? What else did Guerrillas have to lose early on in this year? And I know that they've had some time to develop. Their first couple of weeks weren't great. But when you talk about, well, Mac, what he did in New York, completely 180 that team around. Awakening, we've talked about him to potentially be back-to-back MVPs and what he did for Florida. So I think there's a lot of examples. You can even look at Farrow on Florida. Last year, you can look at Simp and Abizi.
Hold on. You can't add Farrow to this. You can't add Farrow to this debate. It's not like he's an amateur player. He's not an amateur player at all. We know how good Farrow can be. Come on, Joe. You look
at Dallas. You look at Dallas at the start of the year. You look at Dallas at the start of the year. They went for Shotzi and Illy. They went for challenger players
at the start of the year. Exactly.
Right,
That's the perfect time to do it.
But what I'm saying is they were instantly a contender. They went for the younger players, and that's what these teams have to do. The teams that are in a position not to win, they have to try and find talent. They have to take a shot because nothing else is going to work. Would you love to trade for a top player? Sure. But what are actually your options? What are your options right now at this point? Tell me. There's not. That's why Seattle hasn't made one. That's why Optic Gaming Los Angeles hasn't made one. You could talk about London and Chicago, how great that their trades have been. But guess what? I think you could stick about any player on that Chicago roster, and they probably would have had pretty darn similar results. London, they've already had all of those veterans. They've had the talent. They were just trying to find that player. So I don't know. I think if you look at what teams have done with the challenger players, it has paid off a lot more than what some of these pro player trades have turned into.
What do you guys have to say about this panning out historically? Like players who have kind of come in and shaken things up from challengers in the previous years?
I mean, I feel like every year there's a name or two that comes through. I mean, last year, Simp is the prime example, right?
Simp,
he comes
Envoy,
in as soon as he turns 18, and I mean, talk about rookie season, right? The kid was phenomenal. He still is phenomenal. So I think you're going to see that more and more. I think the structure of the league probably helps a little bit more than it maybe has in the past, where you can see these upcoming talents and you can kind of feed them in. You look at having substitutes, something that we've never really explored. I mean, we've had like official subs, sure, for years and years, but you never really seen them come into play. You're seeing that now. So I think it's set up more so where you can have success as a challenger player. But Joe, I want you to answer me truthfully. Truthfully. You are playing for the most amount of money you've ever played for in Call of Duty. And you have 5 weeks. Are you honestly going to tell me you as a player would pick up a challenger player over a proven professional player?
Again, it comes down to who's available, because I've been in that position where I had to go with an 18-year-old who I've never played with, and I took a risk, and that was in 2014 with Study.
Yeah.
I had to take the chance. Sometimes your options are 100% limited, and again, the reason that these teams that would love to make a trade haven't is because why would you try to help a team get better? Like, why would you trade your better players? That's just not going to happen. So the only other option is to take that chance. Like, maybe if there's some money involved or whatever business there is, sure, that could absolutely happen. But that's not the case. The reason these teams haven't made changes is because they can't. And that's when you look at these challenger players. So a lot of the times when you're stuck between a rock and the hard place, you have to take the risk. I had to do it. Other teams have had to do it, and it has worked out before.
I think this is the time where teams have to pull out their money. I think it's as plain and simple as that, right? The risk that you took at the start of the year clearly hasn't worked. I think you need to pull out the checkbook. You need to start writing some checks. You need to start making the best possible team you can. And the one thing I will say, okay, and this is kind of like the cherry on the top of my entire argument, okay? We do not know, A, when Champs is going to be, or B, how is Champs going to be played. We do not know that as of right now. Due to current conditions in the world, you look at COVID, we don't know. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be online? Like, again, you just can't plan for that. And that builds into the challenger argument, right? Like, if Champs is online, there's no way in hell you want to pick up an unproven player. You just don't want to do it. And I know if you did a quiz of all the professional players in the league, they'll tell you the same thing. No, we don't want to take that risk. We can't afford to take that risk. They're playing for the most amount of money they've ever played for. They can't. If Champs is online, sure, maybe you can afford to take that risk. Maybe you can, because players will feel more comfortable. There'll be a little less pressure. I say a little because they're still playing for so much money.
It's like a whole different atmosphere when you're playing with so much on the line. I totally get that. Would you rather play with somebody who's lost in that setting than somebody who's never experienced it?
I'd take someone who lost, because I think they can use those experiences and they can learn from it. I think someone who's never experienced it, I mean, you're telling me that you would want to sit in a grand final with someone who's never been in a grand final before, and you're playing for that much money? There's no way. I refuse to believe that Joe takes that stance. I know Joe very well. There's no way.
I'm just saying, again, you're talking about making changes in 2 weeks, right? And the teams that are going to do that are teams they believe they cannot win right now. So why not take the risk? Because we're not talking about top 6 teams. They're not. It's not going to happen. They're not making changes.
Are we not?
That won't be a thing. No. Who's going to make a change from the top 6?
I'm just saying, are we not? I mean, top 4, I don't think so. But then you look at other teams. I mean, if an offer comes up, they might take the chance. You never know. At the end of the day, you're playing for the W, right? You're playing for the win. Like,
I don't think that'll happen. Minnesota, they've already said they're not making a change. London, they just made a change. Not going to happen. New York, they're not making a change. They've had success with
fair.
Max. So Optic Gaming LA is maybe the one team that you could say they might go for it. But guess what? They've already gone with an existing pro in Chino. So now what?
Well,
now what do? You go for a challenger player. That's what you do.
No, I think you go for a higher caliber player than Chino. I said on Trading Shots, Chino wasn't going to be the answer. Like, no disrespect to him, Shotkara, I was right. He was never going to be the solution to that team. You cannot kid yourself. We knew from the beginning he wasn't. He was a vibe fix, and boy, did he fix their vibes. But it shows you there is something deep-rooted in that team, which is an issue. Chino cannot fix that by himself. There needs to be a player that comes into that team and fixes
pro. It didn't work. They need some firepower.
Again, no, they need a superstar. They need a superstar, not an existing pro. They need something to come out and truly fix that team.
And all the superstars are existing pros on top teams, so you're taking a shot on a challenger
That's
player.
why I said you pull out the checkbook. You pull out the checkbook, you throw money at Seattle Surge if you need to, you try and get Octane, whatever the fix is. I don't know the fix. Sure, I'm not part of the organization. I'm not one of the part of the team. I'm not a player. I don't know. But at this point, you got to do something. And if you don't do something drastic, and I don't think a challenger player is a solution for Optic Gaming LA, I think your champs is basically done and dusted. You honestly, you may as well not even bother playing.
You know what? There is something to be said about these new players, these secret weapons that come in. There's not much data on them. There's not much information. So they kind of catch all the other pros off guard when they come in. Awakening's definitely been catching a lot of people off guard from what we've been seeing as of recent. You said a lot of things, though, Benson, that are very logical. And that makes sense, I feel like. This is just such a tough argument. I'm going to give it to Joe. I'm going to give it to Joe because I do believe that Joe
has lied to you, Malik. Joe has lied. He has lied with a smile on his face.
I have been in this position before. It's a moment of desperation, and what else are you supposed to do? That's what these teams are at.
I do like the whole Hail Mary approach to things. I do think that I have been convinced. I have been convinced by the multitude of situations that Joe has brought up in this argument that
that's fair.
Opening it up to the challengers players and bringing in some fresh young talent, some hungry talent that nobody has any data on, just to catch everyone off guard. That's a strat right there. And we've seen it work more times this season in the CDL than we've seen the other side of this argument work. So I'm going to give this last round to MerK, which makes him the winner of this game because he got 7 points, which gives him a total of 19 and you a total of 18. Benson, MerK, you have 60 seconds to pop off in our Astro Listen Up moment.
All right, here we go. Listen up. Maven, I got your back. I got your revenge on Ben. Ben, it was a great episode. We had a lot of good discussions here. I think it could have gone either way. First things first, I want to give some props to the teams and the social media. I know we've been having a lot of fun during these home series events, and the content that they have put out has been absolutely hilarious. Between Florida, London, Dallas, you name it, we've had a ton of fun during these home series, and it's even better due to the social medias that these organizations are putting together. Secondly, all the people that are giving Awakening in the Florida Mutineers crap, that is just baloney. They have dealt with what the hand that they have to play, right? And they have responded. And I guess it's one thing if they're like having some close matches, but they aren't. They just 3-0'd FaZe in the grand final. They 3-1 FaZe in another grand final. They are beating the number 1 team in the league handedly, and you have to respect that. And I love that the response that some of the Mutineers players are giving. Like Frosty, he's like, you know what, I know that for the most part these are practice for the big one, and I 100% get that. The goal for them should be to get a top 2 seed, put themselves in the best opportunity to win the world championship, but they are winning these home series and they're doing it so darn great, right? Like they are just absolutely dominating. So I want to give them my props, and to be able to deal with the probably a lot of hate that they're dealing with. So a shout out to the Florida Mutineers. Way to handle this with pride. And yeah, man, what you guys are doing these last couple of weekends has been so fun to watch.
That does it for this episode of Contesting the Point. Thanks once again to MerK and Benson for that fire discussion and debate that you guys just had. And everybody, we will see you guys once again next week. Enjoy your summer.